Hello everyone, it is very lovely to see you. Welcome to the live. Hello Vicky, afternoon, how are you? Hope you're alright. Hello Lynn, nice to see you. Julie, how are you doing? How is California today? Hope you're doing well. I'm very well, thank you. All good, all good. I hope everyone is all right. I hope you've had a good week, not been too stressful or too difficult. Oh, Michelle, I have to go like that because let me see if I can draw this thing over. Oh, I don't know if I can. I'll just go with my eyes trying to see the screen. I'll go like this so that I can actually see what I'm doing. Morning. Oh. Now then, there's a lovely name there. Now, am I saying it right if I say Kiva? Kiva, right? Hello, nice to see you. Jasmine, hello. Alice, hello. Oh, thank you. I've got it in like a little ponytail because it looks a bit rubbish today, but thank you. It makes me feel official because I've got a surprise today for everyone. So, yes. Oh, Kiva, it is good. Cool. So Kiva's doing a sneaky work TikTok, which I think a lot of people do, don't they? That they're at work and they're just having a little look on the old phone. So it's nice that you come. If you dip in, that's great. Cara, hello, nice to see you. Jasmine says ponytail means business. Yes, I am on business mode today. So I have got a fantastic guest today. I'm going to get straight into it because I don't want to waste any time because I've been trying to get this person on this live for ages, and the first time the app wasn't ready, the second time poor thing was really laid low with illness, and so we couldn't go live. And today is the day, barring any dreadful things happening. I'm going to be talking to Hazel Gale, as you can see up here. And Hazel Gale is a fellow cognitive hypnotherapist, but she's also an amazing person. She has been British, European, world kickboxing, boxing champion. She's an author. She wrote this book behind me, Fight, which is a fantastic book. She's also an international speaker, and her latest project is this app, Betwixt. So I've invited her here to have a little chat. And if you've got questions for Hazel, then please ask away, because I think she's very, very keen to let everyone know about this amazing app. So I'm going to, let's see, here any second. Here she comes, here she comes. I'm hoping.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hello, I can't see you though, Hazel.
Using audio only, it says. All right, there we go.
Okay. Are you there? Let's
Am I
see.
there? Trying to work out how to put a...
We can hear you all right. We can hear you all right. You work on that a bit, and I'm just going to say, oh, there you are. Yeah, hello. At last, we've managed to do it, so we're all right. Everyone, welcome Hazel, the co-creator of Betwixt. That is this amazing app that I've been telling you all about for the last few months, really. So, Hazel, can we kick off by you telling us a little bit about you? Welcome to the live. Tell us a little bit about you and what you're here to chat about today. That would be lovely if you could.
I am, my background is all over the place, so this is always a difficult question to answer. I started out in art school and then became a fighter after art school. I went into hospitality because that's what you do with an art degree. And I met a guy in hospitality who I quickly fell in love with, and therefore followed him into a kickboxing dojo, even though I was, a smoking, drinking party girl who hadn't done a press up since school. And it didn't work out with him, but that didn't matter because I completely fell in love with kickboxing within 15 minutes and maybe a little too much, because then the pressure of fighting, and making weight and the constant relentless self-doubt that I had at the time led me into a terrible burnout. And, that led me to therapy, and it was sessions with QCH Therapist Trevor, who has taught both of us our style of therapy that not only got me back to health and back into the ring, but also just completely changed my life, changed my connection to myself, my understanding of what I truly wanted and valued. I mean, everything changed, meaning that I left fighting behind, trained as a therapist, and I practiced for 10 years before stopping seeing clients a couple of years ago because of Betwixt. And in that time, I wrote the book. The book behind you is Fight. That's the hardback version.
Are you impressed that
Yeah,
I got the book is always on my bookshelf, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to move it so it's visible.
The paperback version had a different name. This is the paperback version. The Mind Monster Solution, colourful version of it. They let me change it after the Mind Monster concept sort of took off after the hardback came out. And then most recently Betwixt, and Betwixt is, I'm sure we'll talk in much more depth about it, but Betwixt is an interactive choose your own adventure story that leads to clarity, courage, and self-insight. So it's a mental health game set in a story.
Yeah, and it is really different, isn't it, to anything else that I've seen. There's lots of people who are saying hello to you, Hazel, on the comments. We have such a lovely community here, and I'm also joined by my moderators. So this is a really lovely safe space for people to be in. And so I have the lovely Lynn 250, Vicky Hodson, and Jasmine, who are here, and they always are in the comments keeping everyone safe. They're not therapists, but they're just really kind people with real life experience. So thank you so much to them for being here, and for everyone else who's joining us. Can I ask everyone who's watching, who has had a go at Betwixt? Are there people here who have downloaded it and played with Betwixt? I know that Vicky Hodson has, who's my moderator. She's been really looking forward to chatting with you, Hazel. Let's see what anyone says. So Vicky downloaded it. There's a few other people joining. So Lynn's got the app, but still to get into it properly. Okay.
It requires space.
Yeah. Alice says she hasn't, but she'd like to. So Alice, get down to the App Store. It's completely free, isn't it? And Michelle has downloaded it and started to do it. Vicky said, I really liked it. It's really different from anything I've seen before, and I love that. So why is it different, Hazel? Why would you say it's different?
Well, I mean, the difference was the whole point. I mean, we started doing this because my co-founder Ellie, who's a science writer and entrepreneur, she had been researching mental health and mental health tech, and interviewing lots of people, lots of therapists, psychologists, and also therapy clients. And one question she'd ask all of them was, which are the mental health apps that you'd recommend? And everybody had an answer to that question. Everybody would say one of the mental health apps that most of us know. And then she would ask how frequently they used it, or, how much they used it. And almost everyone said, well, I don't really. Or I used it for a bit, but then I stopped. And she was like, well, that's interesting. So there were all these incredible resources out there, and there are incredible resources out there, brilliantly put together, brilliantly researched, but they aren't sticky. And so in developer-led trials, they can show brilliant effect because there's this, people have to get through it in order to complete the trial. But in the wild, people don't stick with them because they just aren't that engaging. And so she read my book and messaged me afterwards saying that she wanted to talk. And she nervously got me on the phone to pitch this idea for a mental health game that used fantastical story as the vehicle to keep people hooked on the journey, keep people invested. And she said she thought I was going to laugh her off the telephone. What she didn't know is that I'm a huge gamer. My family is all about, we can't even get in a car without turning something into a game. Everything is a game. And I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and fantasy fiction. I'm just a massive gamer and a massive story geek. So this idea to bring psychology into those two areas for me was a dream come true. And so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to plug that gap. We wanted to see if we could take evidence-based tools from psychology and theories from psychology and weave them into a story that was actually engaging. We really didn't think we could do it at first. We were like, we'll try this. We did it. We used, there's a bot program called ManyChat, which is how you make your Facebook Messenger, like do automatic replies when people contact you through your page or whatever. We actually used that, so it was free. And we said, if we can put a story together in this using just the two voices of the player and the bot, and if people can find that engaging, then we'll know we're onto something. And amazingly, it worked. I mean, the story, there was nothing like the one now. We've improved it enormously, but we found that one of our things, what we thought at the time was that people would be interested in the story, but as soon as it started to feel like any kind of therapy or self-help, they'd get turned off. Yeah. But we found the opposite was true. When people played it, the story, they were like, fine. But when they got to the bits that felt personal and they were writing in their own thoughts and feelings and describing the world, that was one of the best bits, when they get to sort of describe what the world actually looks like. Everyone said, that's when I was hooked. That's when this meant something to me. And so we knew then that if that could have that effect in this really basic version of the story, then if we put some time into it, and we bloody did, it took us 4 years to create it, then we could be onto something.
I think that's the thing that I really love about it, is that it is personalized. You know, when you turn up and you the game remembers you and you make choices within the story. And so it's not something where you're just passively sitting there and it's on in the background, or you actually get involved in it. And I remember when I first put it on, like, I'm not a gamer. I don't play any games at all. I've never really enjoyed games. We have a pact in our family that we're not allowed to play Scrabble because it will end in divorce, because my husband is brilliant at it and I am rubbish. But when I first tried it and I put the headphones in, and all of a sudden I was swept away to this world of swirling snow, and the graphics are amazing as well. And I thought, oh, this is different. This is something I've never experienced before. And that was the thing that, you know, that experience plus the fact that it feels quite personal, that was the thing that started to get me hooked on it. How did you transfer it from the really sort of simple bot thing and to where it is today? Because 4 years of hard work, as you said.
I mean, if I'd known how much work it was going to be to get it to where it is now, and then on top of that, how much work it's going to be to maintain it and to market it and everything, I don't know how enthusiastic I might have felt at the beginning of this. I was about to say I don't know if I would have done it, but I still would have done it.
Yeah.
I just realized as you were saying that I should probably explain a little bit more about what it is. It's a text-based game, so it's like an interactive novel essentially. You get dropped into this immersive world. There's the ambient sound of the world and music in places, and you get the story delivered in bite-sized bits, and quite often, every minute or so, you make a choice or you have a conversation. So when you make a choice, that determines the route that you're taking through that particular chapter, and it determines a lot of things that happen later on. And when you communicate, you're talking with this mysterious character known only as the voice. It's a voice in the back of your head, and it's trying to help you how to get out of this strange world called the in-between. And in order to do that, you need to learn to see yourself clearly. One of the main focuses of the game, there are a number, and I'll probably talk about them in more depth later, but one of the main focuses of the game is to help people build self-awareness. So all of these conversations that you have and all these options that you're given are keyed up to allow people to delve a little deeper into the types of questions we need to ask in order to know ourselves, but really never do. And one of the things that interactive fiction has been around for donkeys. But in interactive fiction, you don't usually get to type in. There's almost always just options, and you choose an option and that determines your route. We didn't think that was enough. So we spent a really long time working out how linguistically to make it possible for somebody to type in their answers and for us to take those answers and feed them back without using AI, because we aren't currently using AI for a number of different reasons. And we found this way to do it. Sentence completion is usually what it is. So the voice will ask you a question and it will ask you to answer by completing a sentence, which means that we get it grammatically in an organized way that means that we can then swap the pronouns around. There's all these functions going on in the background. You say something, we change the pronouns from I to you and all that sort of stuff. Remove capital letters and punctuation, and it's taken us ages to get that right. But it was so important because now this voice can have a conversation with you that feels kind of real, because it can say, oh, you told me that you wanted X, or you've mentioned that you value whatever. which turns it into something that is a bit more like speaking to an actual human being. And interesting, we've heard from so many users, people who've been in therapy for years, saying that in some ways it had helped them. I don't want to say it's better than therapy, because it's obviously not, and it's not a substitute for therapy, but in some ways it had helped them to see things they hadn't been able to see before, or helped them to talk about things they couldn't talk about before, because the conversation felt like a real person, but they knew it wasn't. And, you know, no matter how much we love our therapists, there is always the sense that this is another human being who could judge me. And this came up time and time again in the feedback from users, people who'd been in therapy with people that they really liked, but hadn't been able to broach certain topics because of the shame involved in them. So, yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a ramble there about the voice, but that's how the language stuff works, and it's why it's so important.
Yeah, I think Vicky mentioned there, she said it really feels so immersive, and I think the fact that you can type in stuff that you want to say that's completely individual to you and then the voice mentions that again, so it's as though there's this thing that's actually listening to you and understanding you whilst you're becoming self-aware. Is really interesting. I just want to say hello to a few people. So Alex B has joined us. Hello, Alex. I'm sorry that you've got a funeral today. That's just, I hope it goes as well as it can. I'm sorry for your loss, but it's good to see you here. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. I wonder if you could do us a favor, because I always talk about this, but the TikTok algorithm likes it when people do the old tapping of the screen to show likes. So if you were able to, if you could tap to like this, then what happens is the algorithm begins to think, oh, well, this must be an interesting chat. And so it sends it out to more people. So if you're able to do that, that would be brilliant. If you want to follow me or follow Hazel, then that would be fantastic. And also you can share this. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, there are people I know who might be really interested in this app, you can copy the link to this, you can share it direct to their WhatsApp or to their TikTok, and that would be marvelous. And don't forget as well that always I share this to my YouTube, and obviously I'll share it with Hazel so she can share it in your stuff, Hazel. So if you haven't got time now, if you're doing a sneaky Friday lunchtime TikTok on your phone when your boss isn't watching, you can absolutely find this on my YouTube, which is, I think you might be able to see up here. I can't remember if I put it up there. It's usually up there. It's just Sarah Aries Therapy. So I'm just here. So Jasmine is saying, does Hazel see everything people type? So does Hazel see everything people type? What personal details do you give when you sign up or sign in, if any? That's a good question, isn't it? Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I'm going to be able to partially answer. I'm not actually doing the development, so I'm not I'm not a developer, so I'm not completely up on it. But what the App Store says is that personal details are not linked to you. We take the bare essentials of what we need for somebody to create an account, which is just, it's just password and email address. We don't do anything else to link back to people. Technically, I think if we wanted to, we could. The answers that people have to put in are, of course, stored on a server. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to feed them back, and they wouldn't be able to stay a part of your story. Our original version was to make it so they got stored on the individual device of the player, but it meant that if they lost their phone, reset their phone, changed their phone, their whole journey was lost. So we're like, we can't do this. So technically, I think if we wanted to, we probably could scroll through and look at. I think technically we could do it. We could look at people's answers. We aren't doing it, of course, but in terms of whether it's possible, I think it probably is.
Yeah, but that's just a honest answer. It would just be like, isn't it? Yeah, I think
it might be encoded. I don't think the human eye would be able to understand it, but I think technically we would be able to decode it if we wanted to, but we aren't.
And I suppose as well, you've got, there's no link between, so this is person number, whatever it is, these are their answers. You don't know who person, whatever number is, because there's no, if you set it up with an email that didn't have your name on, for example, you could just be fluffybunny@gmail.com, couldn't you? And no one would know actually who you were. But is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I would need to give a proper answer about this. I would need to ask the devs for the actual info. But yeah, as to my knowledge, that is correct.
Yeah, Jasmine says, fair enough. Just the boring GDPR side of me questioning it, it's drilled into us at work, which is fair enough, isn't it? I mean, our personal data is the most valuable thing that we have at the moment, which we can see. Hazel and I were chatting on Facebook about the whole Zoom fandango at the moment with them people taking our personal data. So Alex B says, I'm in coding, and if it's JavaScript, it's likely through something called IDCS, which is secure. I don't know if you know that, Hazel.
I don't know if it's using that, but those terms feel familiar. I'm pretty sure that part of the app is JavaScript. So yes, probably.
Yeah, and Alex B also says she really loves your glasses, by the way.
Thank you. People comment on these glasses so much. Most people love them, but occasionally when you put a post up and it goes really well, and then you get all the trolls. People were saying the other day, I was talking about a friendship breakup on one of my biggest posts, and somebody commented, probably those Deirdre Barlow butt glasses that made her leave.
Oh dear me, it's funny. I have to tell everyone, because when we first talked about doing this, you'd just come on TikTok, hadn't you? And we said, oh look, let's do a live together. And then you had, I don't know, like 126 followers. And so we couldn't do it because you can't do lives until you've got 1,000. So Hazel, being Hazel, went away and came back, and I think I've got enough followers now. And I looked the other day and you've got 27,000. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I did my research.
Anyway, so that's a good thing. So I'm glad that you are that driven person who does what needs to be done to get. The thing is that Betwixt is actually helping, isn't it? I mean, you have evidence that it's not just a game, don't you? It's more than just going on and gaming. Tell us more about that.
We've been really keen to get proper evidence behind the app from the outset. So we started right at the beginning of the R&D process. We started with a few different pilot studies at different universities around the UK. They were mainly looking into engagement. And when then using that information, we iterated and continued. When we got it to a place where we were starting to feel that it was taking shape, we only had four of the 11 chapters of the story. So it was really quite a small amount, and it wasn't in a beautiful app. It was on a really basic PWA beta version. So I was really nervous to put it into the study, actually. And I said to Ellie, I don't think we should do it yet, that all of the information isn't in there. I can't see it having an effect. She thankfully talked me into it. And that study is completed. The data is in. Data are in. It is not published yet. We're waiting for it to get published because the lead researcher has been on maternity leave, but that should happen relatively soon. And it showed significant decreases in both stress and anxiety, and a number of other really positive increases as well. Which honestly, it blew my mind, and it blew their mind as well. We were doing that with a lab called the Games for Emotional and Mental Health Lab in the Netherlands, who focus specifically on trying to find games of all types that have mental health benefits. And when they relayed the information, they said, we don't normally see this. It's really hard for a game to actually create significant measurable effects. But it had done, and even just on those 4 chapters. So we're thrilled to bits about that, and can't wait for it to come out. And we currently have 3 other studies in the pipeline at the moment. We've got a pilot with the NHS, which is getting ready to be done. We've got a neuroscience study looking into emotion regulation with somebody in Austria, which is halfway through, and another one about to start using biofeedback to track real-time, changes in experience, which is going to take forever because they only have a certain number of Fitbits and they've got to do loads of data collection. I think that's going to take 18 months just to complete the study, let alone publish it. So it'll be a while before we see these things, but it's great to have them underway already because it means a lot. And I won't go on about this, but when we were looking into this, we looked at the research behind some of the biggest other mental health and mindfulness and journaling apps out there that make a lot of claims. And what we found was really, really concerning, because around 50% of the studies showed no change anywhere at all. And almost all of the research we looked into, none of it was independent. So there was conflict there. The people who were doing the research had skin in the game for almost all of these studies that we looked at. So we made a decision when we saw that we weren't going to be like that. We wanted to make sure we were doing proper, rigorous, independent studies. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's amazing, isn't it? When you think, because I think probably, well, I might be wrong, but perhaps people look at a game or an app that's on the App Store and they think, oh, that's lovely and it's an interactive story and everything. But to know that you've done that rigorous research, that there's studies going on, that the NHS is involved, is just absolutely amazing. Because I know there's apps, which I'm not going to mention them, but really well-known apps that are great, but they don't have the research behind them, do they? I mean, I know you told me there's a couple that are really well-known, and I thought, well, I won't mention them, but you would assume that they do have evidence behind what they do, but they don't actually. And for you to think, well, I want this to be available to everyone, but for it to actually make a difference and for us to have evidence that it's making a difference, I think that's really remarkable. Vicky says, and first of all, I need to say hello to Elizabeth in Sweden. Welcome, Elizabeth. Hope you're doing all right. I hope your laundry's going all right. But Vicky says, Hazel, do you need more people for future research/studies?
Well, I mean, in theory, probably yes. I mean, nothing at the moment, but we don't really look for the subjects because they're independent studies. So the researchers usually have a pool of people that they use for their research. So, I think we put a Reddit post out to get more people into the study I just mentioned. So we do sometimes help, but we can't have any contact with them, of course, because then that would taint it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? And I think, a study that isn't independent is not really worth the paper it's written on, is it? If it's influenced by the people that want the study to turn out really well. So how does it feel if someone signs up for the game? How does that feel when they first begin, and when do they start noticing changes in how their mind works, how they feel, anxiety, depression wise, would you say?
What are these studies that are underway at the moment should give us more granular insight into what the actual journey is like, which is really exciting. But I can tell you from anecdata that we have from user feedback, that and also for what we can see about how people actually continue. I mean, the first dream, it takes around 20 minutes to do the first dream. So there are 11 dreams in the game. Dreams are like chapters. They take between 20 minutes, and some of the longer ones towards the end can take up to around 45 minutes to complete. Of course, you can do them in bits if you don't have that much time in one go, and they can take longer if you choose to sit with the questions for ages and write enormous amounts of writing. Of course, we can't control that. And the first chapter, the first dream, is really an introduction to the world. So you answer a couple of questions about what you want in life. It gets you thinking, but really it's just an introduction. But what we've found is that if people complete that one, they are so likely to continue. What that means is that there's a percentage of people who don't complete that one, and of course there are going to be people who are like, what the hell is this? Because it's a bit different. And we've had feedback from people saying they stopped because they realized it was going to get them asking questions that they didn't feel ready to ask. That's also fine. But yeah, so once people have been through that first one, the feedback we get is that they felt calm, they felt seen, and they felt intrigued. And so once people are at that stage, their mind is in it. And the reason there's a story is because story is how we learn. Story is what the brain is geared up for. Jonathan Gottschall's amazing book, The Storytelling Animal, looks exactly into this, how the mind was literally formed by story for story. We learn best through story. I mean, how many times have you read a self-help book and you walk away at the end, and instead of having the data or the details or the processes in your head, you have the little autobiographical illustrations of how things work in your head, or the client stories in your head. Like, that's the stuff we take away because story is sticky. And we learn as kids, we learn through role playing and story, of course, but it doesn't stop when we're kids. I need to look up where I found this, but a brilliant story once about a group of junior doctors who were challenged with the task of working out how to treat a cancer that was hidden right inside the body. Let's say it was liver cancer or something. It was inoperable, so operation wasn't possible, and chemotherapy wasn't possible. They were left with, what do they call it, radiation therapy. But the problem is, if they just sent a beam of radiation into the cancer that was big enough to kill the cancer, it would have killed everything in its path, including lots of other important organs. And so they were challenged to try and work out how to do this. And none of these junior doctors could think of it. Then they were told a story about a king who wanted to win in a war against, history is not my thing, against, take down a castle, right? Take down a castle. And his troops on horseback were there, and they sent the first lot of troops up to the keep of the castle, and they tried to break their way in, but the troops just got killed off by the defense of the castle. And so the king steps back and tries to work out how else this can be done. What he decides to do instead is divide the troops up into lots of different places around the castle, and for them all to come in at the same time, climbing over walls and picking off the defenders one by one. That way they managed to have their little victory. Once the junior doctors had been told this story, they all knew exactly how to treat the cancer. Instead of sending this one massive beam of radiation therapy through, they would send lots of small beams through from places that wouldn't interact with other organs, so that the culminative point in the middle got the dose of radiation that it needed to treat the cancer. So that's just one example. I mean, actually, there's another awful one where people were told a story about invading bacteria in the body, having talked about their views on immigration. And then when they filled out the same survey on their views on immigration afterwards, those who had read the story about invading bacteria had become much more angry and afraid of immigrants than they had been beforehand. So stories inspire, they teach, and if used in the worst situations, they can manipulate us enormously. What we wanted to do with Betwixt was to use that vehicle of story in a way that was positive. We don't want to make people not agree with immigration, but instead to learn to connect with themselves and have self-compassion and self-awareness, and to fight their emotional battles in effective ways.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how story and metaphor is so powerful. I mean, I use that all the time when I'm working with my clients. And I noticed someone was asking, are we therapists? Lynn, my moderator, answered the question, and I'm actively working as a therapist. Hazel has been a therapist for a long time and is now giving her energy to Betwixt, so that this can help even more people. But metaphor and describing things in a way that is a story, for me, it's just so much more powerful. I talk about, for example, the green zone, and I talk about just tiptoeing into the amber zone. I talk about curiosity and those sort of things, I think, are so much easier for people to remember and connect with than if you're talking in purely scientific language, which for me, I just glaze over. If someone tells me a story, then I'm in there. But if someone is just going to lecture me with, do this, do that, and this thing and that thing, then I switch off. So I think learning is about feeling relaxed. And so when you're on Betwixt and you're there and you've got the sound, the music, you've got the story that you're engaged in, you're in that relaxed trance state, aren't you, where you're very open to begin to change. And you and I were talking about the curiosity, about people developing a curiosity and a self-awareness, and the sense of how within the story we have choice, and that begins to reflect on our life externally. We begin to realize that if we are observers of our lives, we also have choice in our lives, don't we?
Yeah, it's about creating agency and also engaging imagination. Imagination, along with curiosity, is so important. If you don't get curious about something, if you can't imagine something being different, it never will be. And also the other thing is that imagination and imagery and a world, world building is really big for me. That's what I need in my books. I need the world to be tangible. And if you get to be put in this sort of virtual playground that's full of this imagery, the information that you're learning doesn't just go through to your intellectual brain, your conscious brain, it can sink into the rest of you, because that's what the unconscious mind works with. The unconscious mind doesn't listen to logic and reasoning and language. It listens to metaphor and imagery and emotion. So if you don't teach in a way that involves those things, you don't get a full understanding of stuff. You just go away with the rational understanding that, you know, something should be changed or something should feel different, but doesn't. I'm sure that you've heard from your clients so many times before, and I used to hear this so often, that people would say, well, I know I need to do this, but I can't make myself do it. Or I know why I feel this, but that doesn't change it. And we all know what that's like. We all know what it's like to want to give up something like smoking. The fact that we know we should doesn't mean that we do.
It's
We
so
need
true.
to embody the information needs to get everywhere, not just into our little logical brains.
Exactly. There's a great question here. I'm just going to put my glasses on to read. So Sarah Endicott says, how neurodivergent friendly is it when someone doesn't get metaphors?
I'd have to look into it to get a full answer to this. I mean, I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD, and we hear a lot from users with both ADHD and autism, who find it really helpful. With ADHD in particular, it's really, really great because it allows you to read fiction in a way that you stay with it. And I think that's because of the pacing of the information. You don't just get this whole page that you can lose track of. With metaphor, I mean, I don't know if you would need to get metaphors in order for it to work, because it's not like we're delivering metaphors and saying, here's a metaphor, you need to understand it. The metaphor is just part of the experience. The world is metaphorical. The journey is metaphorical. But the process you engage in and the conversations you engage in aren't necessarily metaphorical. I mean, if whoever it was who asked that question has some experience, Sarah, I would love for you to play it and let me know what it's like for you as somebody who doesn't engage with or get metaphors.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? To give it a go and to feedback if you have the time and the energy to do that, because it's really helpful in the development of how the app works. Because I'm sure that what your aim is to help as many people as possible. So Ali, thank you for that question, Sarah. I think that's really interesting and a really important question. Ali says, would you recommend playing this game if someone is in an acute or suicidal mental health episode?
No,
That's a tricky question.
Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, if somebody is having suicidal thoughts, my only recommendation would be for them to see a professional face to face as soon as possible, or their doctor. So I would never say, I would never recommend the use of this in those situations. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this, of course, is that lots of people are really struggling with mental health who simply don't have access to therapy. They either can't afford it, or there are cultural reasons why they don't feel they're allowed to do it, or they feel too shameful or nervous to speak to another human being. I would hope that the game can help people like that. If it's the only option they have is to use digital mental health, then I would really hope the game would help with people like that. I also think what we've found really, really interesting is that lots of people who have played have then signed up to therapy afterwards, and they hadn't done before. They hadn't felt ready for it before. And I think that what's going on there is that it gives them like a trial run at talking about their feelings and talking about their problems, putting them into words and realizing it's not actually as scary as they thought it was going to be to talk about them, which kind of gears them up for real face-to-face therapy. And what I would love, I'd really love if we were to be able to get this NHS study done and all of the red tape that will follow after it, maybe years and years before this would happen. But what I'd love is if it was on the NHS as something for people to use when they're waiting for therapy, because it will give them something to feel connected to and to feel calm with in the wait, which is often quite long. And it would give them a head start. They would be able to go to their therapist and say, this bit was really challenging for me, or I worked out that I have a fear of this, whatever it is that comes up for them. So no, I wouldn't recommend it as something for people who are in crisis to use, but I would hope that it's going to help people on all different sort of levels of the scale when they need it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I agree with everything that you said there, definitely. Hope you're all right, Ali. It's nice to see you. Ali is joining us from Australia, so it's really lovely to
It was a
see you, Ali.
nightmare.
And I hope you're all right. Vicky says, "Is it user friendly? Is it a user friendly game for people with dissociative disorders?"
This is another one. Actually, I meant to look into this. I think that if somebody has a dissociative disorder, they should speak to their therapist or psychiatrist before they engage with the game. One of the things that there are a number of different theories and models that the game is based on. One of the big ones is self-distancing, which for somebody who hasn't got a dissociative disorder is, really, really powerful way to manage emotions, regulate emotions, and change the way we see ourselves. It's possible that it wouldn't be a great idea for somebody with a dissociative disorder because it would be the natural state for them anyway, and it might, if I don't know if it would trigger a dissociative episode, but it could do, I suppose. I need to get some proper facts from one of our psychiatrist advisors about that, to see if it's actually contraindicated. The contraindications we've got were all set out by a group of psychologists and psychiatrists that we spoke to at the beginning, and that wasn't listed. So as far as I know, it's not a problem. But I've heard somebody ask this question before, and it rings a bell. So I'm going to look into it more carefully soon. But yeah, as far as I know so far from the experts we've spoken to, not an issue.
I think the thing to remember for everyone, isn't it? It's the same with absolutely everything in life, is to be aware of our edges, of the tolerance that we feel, to begin to understand the difference between, in this place I'm fine, I'm okay, and I'm feeling good, and then I'm reaching my edges and I'm reaching the place where I'm starting to not feel so great. And when you have those feelings, to be able to go, no, enough, I'm going to stop this now, I'm going to step away from this. And whether this is playing a game, or whether it's being in a social situation, or whatever it might be, that self-awareness is really important. And that's a skill that we all learn, isn't it, as we go along through our lives.
I should mention that in the game, there are different processes in each chapter, but every time there's something that could be difficult for people, there's always a way to skip it. So you don't get forced through anything. And we're really careful with that. There are almost enough of those options to skip it that you might get a little annoyed with them, but they're only embedded under other options. But yeah, we don't want to force anybody into a conversation they don't want to have, or any thinking they don't want to do. So you can play the game and really do it without going into any of the processes if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. And I think as well, the fact that you spent like 4 years developing this, and you've got all these research studies going into it, shows that you have considered so many of these different things. There's a question here, I can't see your name, blind as a bat, so from SOS1234, is it dyslexia friendly too? That's a really good question, because there's so much reading and writing involved in it.
I mean, again, I'm actually not diagnosed dyslexic, but I'm pretty sure I am, and it's fine for me. What we've made sure that we do, the text comes at different speeds, so you can choose the speed, and the slowest speed, which is really quite slow, gives you much more time to process and think about it. But because they're coming in little chunks as well, I think that really helps with the with reading for people who struggle with it. The only thing that could get, if you make spelling mistakes and on your inputs, those will sometimes get fed back, but that's a minor thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've tested the game. I must have played this game, maybe some of the tunes thousands of times. And so I'm constantly coming across my own spelling mistakes and going, rolling my eyes at them when the voice is feeding back something that I've written in wrong. But it's not, that's a minor thing. Again, the same as with, I think it was Sarah who mentioned about the metaphor thing. Mm-hmm. For anybody who is dyslexic and plays this game, I would just love to hear the feedback. We have, after you get to the fourth dream, we send out a survey, which you can use to anonymously feedback, or you can just message me on here or message us by email or whatever. We just want to hear from everybody. So if anybody plays and has those sorts of experiences, and has something to feedback for us, how it could be better, then please let us know.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, for those of you who are joining us, and I can see Heather's joined us and Julesy has joined us, so it's lovely to see you. Hope that you are well. I'm chatting today with Hazel Gale, who is a friend, a colleague of mine, a fellow QCH therapist. As was Hazel was actually one of the people that trained me when I was training to be a therapist, and she's now developed a fantastic mental health app, a game, an interactive story called Betwixt, the story of you. And so we're chatting about that today. So if you haven't downloaded it, then do download it when you get a chance. And Hazel's answering lots and lots of questions from everyone. I can see that Alex is heading off. Alex B is heading off now, but it was great to meet you, Hazel. So thank you, Alex, for being here. Let's see if we've got any questions here. I'm sure I saw one. Ali. So Ali said, thanks for explaining. So Ali asked a question about playing when you had a sort of difficult thoughts, maybe suicidal thoughts. And Ali was actually the person that asked the question about dissociation that I spoke to you about. So she says, oh, thanks for explaining that. It makes so much sense why it was a bit dissociative for me. So, and Dice Man says, what is dissociative? So I don't know if would you be all right to explain that just briefly, and then we.
I mean, dissociation happens in lots of different ways. It is a natural thing that the brain does. If you have a dissociative disorder, then you're doing it too much and you're not in control of it. Dissociation really just means, sorry, somebody just mentioned that I talk too fast. I totally talk too fast. I need to slow down. Sorry, I do it all the time. If you have a dissociative disorder, then you're dissociating too much, which means that you are feeling disconnected from yourself. And it can happen in lots of different ways. It can happen in a just sort of purely emotional way where you know what, lots of people will know it from when you've done something like public speaking and you're really nervous, and it's almost as if you are kind of just above or behind yourself, watching yourself talk, or you're talking, but your mouth is doing the talking for you and you don't feel in control of it. Those are common natural examples of dissociation. So yes, it's a normal thing the brain does. If you have a dissociative disorder, then it is causing problems. It's happening pathologically and it's out of your control, which is why we were talking about that.
Yeah, thank you for that very lovely explanation. So what happens when you've gone through all 11 chapters and you get to the end? What happens then?
Well, there is there's a new, we're literally just releasing a build today with a new chapter at the end, which is called The Infinite Dream, which, as it sounds, can go on forever if you want to. The questions will loop. So that opens up at the end. Also, we have made replayable versions of smaller parts of the dreams, because some people do go and replay the whole game, or they replay dreams repeatedly, but we didn't want people to have to do the entire story again in order to access the tools. So there are small sort of bite-sized versions of the things that you found helpful in the dreams that you can go back to and replay with different ideas or different situations in mind. So once you've finished the game, at the moment, those are the tools that are still there for you to continue using. And of course, the more you use them, the more automatic they'll become. So repeating these, something like a self-distancing process, for example, self-distancing being a very healthy use of dissociation. If you want to read more about it, look at Dr. Ethan Cross's book, Chatter, which is relatively new and lots of people are talking about it. His research is amazing. We've been into that since long before he wrote that book, because we've been following him, because he's so good. We even spoke to him at one point. He's great, bit of a hero. But he looks into how self-distancing can help us to manage our emotions in the moment amazingly. If you talk to yourself when you're feeling anxious, do it in the second person. Don't say, okay, I'm feeling anxious. Just say, Hazel, you're feeling anxious. And talk to yourself that way. The studies that they have on that show that we feel so much more in control of ourselves and so better able to perform clearly once we've talked to ourselves in the second person as opposed to the first. Mad that it makes that much difference, but it does, because it helps us to relate to ourselves like we would relate to someone else. It sort of repositions us, not as me, but as just another human being who's struggling. So, shit, why did I start on that? Where did that come from?
I was listening to you so intently that I'm completely lost in your answer
Go on,
anyway.
go on. It's gone. Oh yes, what happens after the game?
What
Yeah,
happens
so what
after
I
the
was saying,
game? Well done. Well,
yeah,
nicely saved,
things,
Hazel.
things like, yeah, just things like the self-distancing process after you finish the game, or actually at any point once you finish that dream, you can go in there and you can repeat it with different experiences and different memories. And the more you do something like that, then the more it will become second nature, which is what you want. Oh, and ultimately we will be writing new stories. We're engaging with a couple of three different new writers, amazing writers at the moment for new stories.
Cool. That is good to know. Excellent. So there's a question here from Dr. Laura, psychologist. Nice to see you, Dr. Laura. Welcome. What does the game intend to target from a mental health perspective?
Well, emotion regulation is one of the main ones. So there are the key things that we've involved while making it are Dr. Tasha Urich's research on self-awareness, Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion, Ethan Cross's research on self-distancing. Those are the three sort of selves. And all three of those things have been shown to make enormous differences to people's wellness in general, but in particular with self-compassion and self-distancing, it's emotion regulation. So one of the studies we have underway at the moment with a neuroscientist in Austria is going to look directly at emotion regulation and how the game helps people with handling emotionally challenging situations. So we'll have more information on that later. But I would say that in terms of tackling, emotion regulation is the thing. In terms of goals, self-awareness, self-compassion are the main things.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because I think that so many of us, we become so consumed, so overwhelmed by the emotion of what we're in, that it's quite a skill to be able to begin to be curious, to begin to sort of step out in a healthy way and begin to be aware of what's happening, what our limits are, and what we can do to help ourselves. So yeah, it's really interesting that it can help people. As you said right at the beginning, it's not a replacement for therapy. If people are struggling, then they need to go and talk to their doctor, talk to the therapist, and go down that road. But it's quite difficult to do that these days. And so it's hopefully an option that is part of a whole toolbox that people can begin to develop to help themselves. Soz asks, just wondering, could it help with grief or loss?
Maybe. I mean, what we've done with this first, Betwixt is as I said before, it's the first of a number of stories we want to write, and this one is broad in its focus. That's why we're focusing on self-compassion, self-awareness. These things are huge umbrellas under which all sorts of problems and solutions sit. So it's possible it could help with grief or loss. It's not going to do it directly because there is no, we're not directly addressing that at any stage in the game. But, the things that happen during grief that are so hard for us to handle so often, feeling like we've lost touch with who we are, feeling like if we've lost somebody that was such a part of our world that we don't really understand where we fit anymore. And confidence, when my dad died, my mother's confidence was completely obliterated because, we didn't realize it until it happened, but she'd convinced herself, he was such a gregarious, charming man. She'd convinced herself that, so many people that they knew were really just friends with her because she was married to him. Obviously, it's nonsense. She's amazing. But, it was really difficult for her in that situation. So I would hope that because of the broad scope involved in the game and the focus on getting back in touch with yourself and handling emotions, that we might be able to help people going through that. But again, if somebody is going through that, I would recommend that they visit a grief counsellor or a therapist to talk through the experience if it's difficult.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for all the really great questions. It's really interesting, and I think that hopefully Hazel has been able to show that this is more than just a game. This is something that has been thoroughly researched, continues to be researched, and is ever evolving, and that can begin to make a difference to the way that we deal with life, really, whilst at the same time being something that's really cool and immersive. Sarah Sear says, must look into this game, sounds cool. Love stories and creative stuff. And Aine says, I've just installed Betwixt and looking forward to giving it a go. So I think that it's one of those things that, once I share this on YouTube, if this has been something that's really interesting for you, and perhaps you have friends, family who you're thinking, well, they might be interested in this, they might enjoy playing Betwixt, then feel free to share this live, share the YouTube video once it's up, because at the end of the day, we all want to help people, don't we? I mean, that's the whole premise of the way that we trained, Hazel, isn't it? Is, we're stronger together, we're changing the world one person at a time, and you're moving into a whole new realm doing this, which is really exciting. What are your sort of plans for the future? Where is this leading to, and what do you hope is going to happen?
Oh, there's so many things we could do. I mean, at the moment we're focused on getting Betwixt, the proper research, getting the research that's already been done published, getting the new research conducted, and getting it out to people. Marketing is it's a constant slog. It's very, very, very time consuming and difficult and expensive. So we're focusing on that. The next thing will certainly be to get the news stories underway. We also have plans to make an audio version of it. So you would be able to potentially sit back, close your eyes, and play the game with your eyes closed, only opening to make the choices, which we think will help beautifully with the immersion. We need to do some clever AI wizardry to get people's written responses fed back from the voice. But there's amazing AI now that can do voice, text to speech, voice with good intonation. So we'll be able to do that just about. And I guess one of my personal big dream for me is to get it into VR. I would love this in VR. I'm a massive fan of VR. I've got a VR headset. I use it very frequently, and it would be an enormous project, and we'd have to do a very small pilot first to see if it's feasible. But it would just be such an amazing thing to work on.
Yeah, that's quite exciting, isn't it? And I think the thought of being able to absolutely close my eyes and be even more immersed in it while still able to make the choices would be fantastic. That would be good. And I've never used VR, but I could imagine, just being in that world with a VR headset would just blow your mind.
Yeah, it would be amazing. And there are so many options for it. People would be able to sort of create the environment around them, physically choosing the things that go. I mean, it would be so cool. But yeah, I mean, that's a big dream and a lot of work, and something that we would have to do a lot of research on before we did it. But
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think it's nearly 1 o'clock. So we've nearly been talking for an hour, and it has been so fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on and telling us a little bit about Betwixt. It has been I'm at last we've managed to do it, which is such a relief.
I know, I'm so sorry for the stop and start. It's my fault entirely at the beginning. We just, as always with these things, we were like, yeah, we'll be launched by X date. Can't remember when it was, some point at the beginning of June, I think, or even earlier than that. Might have been April, May. And of course we weren't launched. I mean, nothing ever happens. Even though we think, okay, it will take longer than we think, and we had a few weeks to it, we never managed to get it right. So yeah, that was my fault. And then lurgy time last week, which I'm still not perfect, to be honest. I hope everybody else isn't going to get this cold, because it was one of the worst ones I've ever had.
Oh, I've got one more question for you, because Jasmine asked, and Jasmine is one of my moderators. Would it help with overwhelm?
Oh, I hope so. Yes. So the two things that showed really significant changes on the one study we've had completed were stress and anxiety. And which is interesting, because actually mental health apps normally don't show significant changes for anxiety. They're more likely to show changes for depression than anxiety. But if that's the case, and if it is helping people with emotion regulation, and also other little things that can help with overwhelm, like boundary setting and stuff like that, which will come up in the game. I would really hope it would. And even if nothing else, if what it helps you to do is to carve out 20 minutes for yourself to sit down, immerse into a world and not think about the rest of it and give yourself an actual break, even if that's all it does, I still think it would be helpful for overwhelm. So yeah, I would recommend it for that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's been here. You've asked some really great questions. So I really appreciate that. If you've just popped on and you're thinking, oh, I've missed the whole thing, this is really annoying, well, do not fear, because as always, what I'll do either later on today or over the weekend is I'll upload this to my YouTube channel, which is Sarah Aris Therapy. If you want the link to that, it's on my bio. There's a link tree to all sorts of free resources. So have a click and have a look at that, and then you can share it with people. And I think the most important thing is to download Betwixt. It's on the App Store. That's where can people find it, Hazel?
Yeah, if you just search either the iOS App Store or Google Play for Betwixt, it will be the only thing that comes up, I expect, because we're the only one called Betwixt. We have a website that you could visit if you like. That's betwixt.life. Betwixt, by the way, is spelled Betwixt. It means between. You can also follow me on TikTok at betwixt.app and on Instagram at betwixt.app. And we have a Discord server. Which we're gradually sort of fleshing out at the moment. You can find the invite to that in our link tree, I believe. It's also sent out when you play the game. And in there we do extra journaling prompts and discussions about various things, and you can talk about your experience of each of the dreams with other people who are playing. So I would definitely recommend checking out Discord. Oh, one thing we're doing in Discord at the moment, which is so great, is we're letting people write really short stories with these amazing sentence like story starters. We have a bot, you put a command in and it gives you a random story starter. Some of them are like big and dramatic, like it was the worst day of her life, and other ones are really weird, like Mr. P was having a terrible day. And you just write whatever comes out, and the things people come out with are amazing. So if you're interested in flexing your creativity muscles, then I recommend that.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. I love that you've created this whole world within the story, but then around the story as well. And I think I would really encourage everyone to just give it a go, see what it's like. If it's your cup of tea, then fantastic. And if it's not, that's okay too. But it would be quite interesting to perhaps let Hazel know what you think about it. And you can do that via any social media, via the website, I'm sure. And also, as she says, after the fourth chapter, if you get through the fourth chapter and then you're sent a feedback sort of thingy anyway. So I think that would be really interesting as well. So because I always know that I always want to know what people's feedback is, because that's the thing that helps us to improve, isn't it? So
important.
Thank you ever so much. I'm so glad we got together. It's really good to see you. Good luck with Betwixt. You certainly deserve it after all the hard work you've put into it. And just briefly, the next live is next week at 12 again. But yeah, just really, really great to chat with you. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. No worries.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Cheerio, everyone. Bye-bye, Hazel, and have a lovely weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.